actually go over Ritchie Balan, right, at the battlefield in Brigham. Sorry, I'm done reading horribly. All right, but right away, I just want to look at his list, right? Ghazghkull Thraka. Whoa! You guys know I'm always hyped about Gaz to a certain extent. I actually gave him a nice little A-tier, knob tier rating in the tier list video recently, and that's for a good reason. I think he does start filling some of the holes that orcs are going to have in some of these harder matchups that we're running into. And here you can see triple Warboss. Again, another version of the triple Warboss. It's obvious why you want the Warboss, to be honest, for 65 points, making the unit that he's in way more reliable in combat, mitigating even death guards -1 to hit. 2 unit of Beast Snagger Boys, which interestingly enough don't have a character support, but that's because sometimes you just want their strength, right? That different in strength threshold from 5 to 6 during the WAAAGH matters a lot in some of these matchups, as well as these multiple unit of boys. Then you have a Burner Boy unit. Surprisingly enough, Burner Boys are starting to make their way again more and more often into these high-end lists. And even me, I know I find myself kind of not looking at Burner Boys too much. Me and the Discord go back and forth sometimes about it, and I'm really starting to have to pay more of attention to this. I think it really does come down to you do need to utilize every phase of 40k to a certain extent, and orcs, you know, we don't have reliable shooting, therefore you need to do something in the shooting phase sometimes. Burner Boys seem to be one of those units for that reason. Actually, I was making sure I didn't skip the vehicles. Okay, then we have triple units of Gretchen. No minute to me, no less than 20. You don't know why? I can rant on it, but we're gonna keep going. 2-man unit of Mega Knobs, just to pretty much escort Ghazghkull. 2 units of Storm Boys, and then here's the real kicker, guys. 5 trucks and 2 battle wagons. Yes, 7 transports. Fantastic. Now, what's getting transports most likely in here? We have trucks for the Burner Boys. We have the triple Warboss and Boys combo. That would surprise people if you were told someone in the meta that, hey, I'm just gonna have a Warboss and pay for a typical Boys unit for that. The skirmishing of that unit is punching up and winning on OC. It's great. You get the truck for scoring secondaries as well. This unit is just an MSU. I'm going to skirmish you, beat you up all over the table, and then I have Gaz to throttle the time that I throttle with his aura capability, essentially, of giving lethals during the WAAAGH, and that's very important. And then Gaz himself giving that kind of different profile for damage is very necessary. What I'm finding interesting is there's not even the knobs on this list. That's something that I personally like to really see on these lists, and there's no knobs. So, but there are Burner Boys for clearing. So right away, let's look at actually some of his matchups. Interestingly enough, we get to see what the missions were for this actually terrain, this list, because they actually show. So right away, just for people who care, I'm off the top of their head, we have Sleepy Engagement for the game 1, Dawn of War, game 2, deployment. These are where the deployments they're going to be, and then the mission Sites of Power. You can see, take a quick look, and I'm gonna go over them as I look at the list. But there's going to be something new I'm trying just for this event, just for this list, because they posted them. We'll see how I do while keeping that in mind. So his first matchup going into Purge the Foe, and interestingly enough, is Knights. So we have the primary mission on this one is Purge the Foe, going into Sweeping Engagement as the deployment. So we have a Knight Crusader, a Knight Warden, 2 Helvrin, 4 Warglaves, and then an Assassin. Okay, this is actually a pretty kind of typical Imperial Knights list. And to be honest, and actually we can actually see the terrain here. Nice, interestingly enough, they did show the terrain. They said right here, it says, if you can read it, Saturday will be 1 and then 2. So you'll see terrain layout 1. So the missions were either on this deployment terrain or on this terrain. So for Imperial Knights on this terrain, it's actually not that bad, as some people would probably be used to in previous older editions of the game where it'd be terrible terrain. You can see the terrains are actually pretty nice, pretty well set up. And with this deployment zone, you're not really getting great lines of sight on the orcs, even in their deployment zone. I would really have liked to know who went first here, but Knights are not one of our main predators anymore, surprisingly enough. Going into this game, Ritchie did go ahead and put up a 96-point win. I would like to actually go into his second game right away, as we have the Chaos Marines. Here we go. And this was Dawn of War deployment. Mission rule was Vital Ground. So this is actually a 4 object. So we have Chaos Lord, Chaos Lord, Chaos Lord, Warp Smith, Cultist Mob, 2 units of Chaos Rhino, Chosen, another unit of Chosen. Okay, this is okay. This is actually quite competitive. Forge Fiends, Obliterators, 2 units of Obliterators, Warp Talons, Nurglings, Silax. Okay, there's actually a pretty good list right here that he's going into right away into that second game. The one thing is the orcs can still win in these skirmish battles versus these specific Chaos Marine units. And even with their very effective firepower, those units aren't really trading their firepower necessarily into what they're going into. Obliterators don't have good range, so orcs, once they start to close the distance, they start to actually outplay the mission on them. They do have some interesting marks that you have to pay attention for them falling back and shooting. They have the capability to regen some of those obliterators. They have the capability to advance and charge in this army. But as a whole, they look like they were trying to actually skirmish as well. They, as you see, triple Chaos Lords, the Warp Smith. You've seen that they actually had kind of skirmishing units as well, which was interesting. But I could see how he ended up winning this one, because if you have Warbosses and all those units, them themselves can be dissecting those units in those skirmishes. You also have the reliable fight and death. They actually have to roll off for their fight and death. So going into his, and he got a 95-point win there. Going into his third matchup, he had Eldari. So we have the Incarn Fusion. I believe this guy actually comes back from the dead. Now I don't understand what he does. The Spirit's Hero, Avatar of Cain, a Warlock, 3 units of Swooping Heart, Wraith Guard, Fire Prism, and Night Spinner. Okay, the Night Spinner is making a come through for reducing movement. Kind of new. Wraith Guard, what are these with the cannons? Cannons. So his real only melee, okay, but he has both the Avatar and Incarn. Interestingly enough, Gaz does have the capability to kind of fight and go to toe-to-toe with these units in a certain extent, especially if during the wall he gets a little lucky, gets some dev wounds, those Mega Knot bodyguards are still alive, right? As they would translate over the dev wound capability to him during the wall. As for the skirmishing part of this game, think about how many transports there were on the list we were looking at. 2 battle wagons and 5 trucks. How are you going to stop these units from actually closing the distance? And this is where I can understand Burner Boys having their own version of capability on here. When you're going against some of these units, hey, I can reliably actually kind of burn some of these small scoring units. And then when it comes down to the fight, that's where Gaz might actually have pulled through and pulled some wins of his own. That would have been a very interesting game to actually learn about and pay attention to. Very fun, very fun. I like that. But he did put up 91 points into that list. Let me close some of these lists because I had kept them all open a second. Lost in the sauce, boys. That's fantastic. Gaz with triple Warbosses, guys. That's just so thematic. If you're an orc like person in general, like you understand the orc lore and everything, that's exactly what a major Great Wall would be. It would be Gaz being followed by a bunch of awesome Warbosses into a fight, and then their mobs of boys. So we got his fourth matchup, Chaos Demons. Honestly, Chaos Demons are usually not super difficult for Orc, but usually they have a lot of Beast Magas, Squighog Boys and such. So we have Be'lakor, the Great Unclean One, Pharaoh's Fate Weather, Lord of Change, Silac, and Blue Scribe, Nurgling, Blood Crushers, Burning Chariots, Flamers, Fleshhounds. Okay. So I'm just giving a little quick peek. Now, this was interesting because they don't actually have, they don't have anything that's specifically just one-shotting Gaz either or popping all. Remember, guys, those transports are going to be able to put tank shock into these kind of monsters that they decide to fight. You can try to get mortal wounds that way. You can always throw grenades into these things. So just because you don't see anti-4+ monster, anti-4+ such, because there's no Squighog Boys on the list we were looking at for this player, it doesn't matter because you can chip them down. All of these small units are actually losing their skirmishes, as we like to talk about skirmishes. The transport capability of getting all over the table, just straight up playing the mission, even if you can't kill everything. You're going to OC it with this other list. And the Flamers, again, can actually come into play on this list, interestingly enough, which is why I'm kind of smiling here, because this was actually his best performing game. He put up 100 points going into that one. And that mission was mission number 4. So Crucible of Battle, Sweep and Clear. Yeah, take and hold. Okay, so this mission is just like the deployment wasn't really too close to each other. There's enough missions in the middle of the board that they're going to have to fight for it in skirmish. They're going to be spread out with each of the individual monster. If you end up tearing one of those down, you're really going to be in a good spot in that game as well. So I'm really appreciating this list because it actually had a pretty good match. It had some, not the hardest matchups we see, but we see some very difficult matchups that most people would be sweating about. And he's getting a great job into all of these. So this is game number 4, Tamara Anvil deployment with the mission rule is priority targets. The primary mission is primary targets, and then mission rule is secret intel. Reading my note. So we have Grey Knights. So we were just seeing how the orcs actually have a hard time against Grey Knights when we were looking at the stats of what our possible natural predators could be. This is one of those things where if you have 5 transports and you have those wagons, Grey Knights suffer with actually trying to pop all of our transports. Most armies are going to have a difficulty with that. The Grey Knights are going to have directly a real problem. And just for everybody's sake, in my opinion, Gaz can go in a battle wagon, but actually we should look at these hard cases because he might not have put them in. Because he'd have just very much not put them. They're hard case, so he didn't put them in there. I think he could, just so you guys think if he don't. But I've been thinking if you're going to play Gaz, there's no problem with just putting him in the reserves and ingressing him either. So very much I can see him being played that way, or just Kool-Aid Manning through the middle of the build terrain, just running through the buildings. So either way, him on the table, here we go. That's how he's going to end up getting around. So we got Brother Captain, Librarian. This is like their only little version of destroying vehicles. Castellan Crow, multiple Terminator squads, but they're 5-man units. Strike Marines, Scepters Marines. It's these are very necessary for them to play, but for us as orcs, we're like, oh, as soon as we can close the distance on you, we're crumping. That's just a straight trade for us. That's just a straight trade. More times than not, we're just beating up those units. Even with our leftover trucks, they're just getting, if they're getting charges off, we're more mortal wounds on there, getting stuck. They're not popping our trucks. Even it's just kind of hilarious. They do have the paladins that you do have to pay attention for. They're going to be playing, and these purgation squads have pretty good fire. Actually, these purifiers actually were the ones that have the real firepower. But he does, as you've seen with all those skirmishing kind of lists, as we like to talk about, what do skirmishes mean? It means the unit that you're trying to get into fights with is sitting somewhere between 100, anywhere from like 85 to like 150 points, and they require usually more commitment than they're worth. Is the optimal kind of skirmishing unit, and then they're going to beat up on all units within their point ranges, give or take. So orcs are just winning a lot of these little skirmish kind of battles all over the field in a funny way for primary or in a straight offensive kind of capability. So these purifiers, even though they're dangerous, we don't have a lot of stuff on there that they're going to be able to care to throttle into too much. Maybe Gaz would be like, a little annoying. Inquisitor Codiaz, he's actually pretty awesome. He has like little dev wounds and everything. He's kind of hilarious. Oh, and he causes you to gain, as the player gains CP, Codiaz gives the player who has him CP as well. And then Inquisitorial Henchmen. So yeah, Grey Knights, they get they are orc kind of predator to an extent. I think that's more of like a skill based thing. And the fact that they're kind of janky and they're really just playing the movement phase. And if you're kind of like a casual player and such, you'll run into them and you'll just be like, oh, what the heck? You can land right here and move this time, and I'm trying to close the distance on you and you moved away from me, and it was kind of like a gimmicky moment. That's kind of why I think Grey Knights aren't really a huge problem. But yeah, great job to Ritchie. He did go 5-0. It was fantastic. I really appreciated his list. It had Gaz.